Hello, 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 and welcome back to Thando's Parlor. I'm back with another video. This is on the Father Wound series. This is chapter 2. I will probably try and hit more than one point today and see how long and where it takes us. And then once I have done that, I am going to put the chapters here. And then in the comment section, I'll put in the timestamps of the chapters. Okay, let's go. So I wanted to start off with what I wrote in my morning pages the day before, or the day that I was starting. I think it was the day before I started this series. I'm watching a video on father wounds, so I can better be able to collect coherent thoughts when I'm filming. What this lady is saying that I've also figured out is having father wounds can make you a people pleaser. It can certainly contribute. I think there are so many reasons why I ended up being a people pleaser, and it's something I'm still working my way out of. I think I'm way better now that I'm older. But having father wounds certainly contributes. But I'm also a Libra. I also have mother wounds as well as father wounds that I had to work through. And so all of those things can definitely contribute. I want someone to love me the way that I was never loved when I was younger. Apparently, the father wounds make you feel like you are not enough, so you go around compensating. I've definitely had the thought that if I loved someone the way that I wanted to be loved, that they would love me as voraciously in return. It did not pan out that way. That used to upset me, but I have come to acceptance. This is true. Yeah, when I was younger, I always felt like it was much easier for me to receive praise and have my positive attributes pointed out, discussed, acknowledged, and praised with people outside of my family than within my family. Within my family, there was just a lot more critiquing and a lot more of being recognized. To be fair, I was a bit unruly as a child, which I do contribute to the father wound as well. That's something that I actually acknowledged in my teenage years, that the reason I was probably so unruly as a child is because that is an aspect that I was missing, and I didn't really know how to articulate how it made me feel. And that largely, whether intentional or unintentional, my early years, I felt so disconnected from the adults around me. I felt so much coldness. Um, and it was so hard because I was so sensitive and I could feel it. And people's words didn't match the emotions that I was feeling. And so it was really hard as a child, because then I would misbehave at home and cause so much havoc. Wow, it could also explain my escapist tendencies as well. Because, so I'll tell you how I was unruly as a child. We're gonna go into that, and then I'll go back to people pleasing, because I do like talking chronologically when I talk about anything. And so, yeah, the way I was unruly as a child, I was fully in my Aries ascendant. I felt quite independent, even of and from my family. And so it felt to me like, okay, yeah, we can like act like we're family and all that, but at the end of the day, like, I don't think that you guys like me like that. And so what I'm going to do is just do whatever I want, because I don't even think you guys would care one way or another, and likely you would demonize whatever I do anyway. And so how it came across was, I would I had a really bad stealing problem when I was younger, especially below the age of 12. And it was mainly stealing within my family, not like outside of it. I would like steal money for pocket money, because my mom would always be like, I don't have the money for this. I'd be like, I'm pretty sure you do. So I would just take it. Horrible. Like, I am not advocating that at all. And when I think about it, it makes me sad and embarrassed and, all those things. But I have dedicated myself to be as honest as possible. So here we are. I'm just going to tell you that's what I used to do. And then I always had this want to escape from my life when I was a child. And I think it's actually something I've battled it with well into adulthood. This need to run away from home because things aren't right at home and I don't agree with things, and no one is going to listen to what I have to say. No one thinks that the way that I've evaluated things is actually correct or the most logical or the most objective. And so it really caused these escapist tendencies in me. And so I can recall after school, in like between the ages of grade 1 and 3, for example, um, going to school, having money to like take the bus and stuff to go home, because kids in Zimbabwe are quite autonomous in that way. I didn't have anyone to pick me up. I knew where and how to get home, and getting home by the bus was probably one of the safer ways. And I would end up spending my money, and I would say like buy chips after school that I didn't need, like hot chips, and then like eat with my friends and hang out with them. Then they'd be like, okay, bye, we're gonna go home. That was really nice hanging out with you. And then afterwards, I'd be like, I just used up the money that I was supposed to get on that bus with. So I guess I'm gonna have to walk home. And I'm talking like walking maybe like 10 kilometers or something, like something ridiculous, something that I shouldn't have been doing, but it's because I knew geographically where home would be, so I would just walk in that direction until I found houses that looked somewhat accurate. I had actually a really good, for such a child, like I had such a really good mental understanding geographically of the city that I lived in, and so I would just find my way, or I would early manipulation days, I would just like cry to an adult that I'd lost my pocket money and I couldn't get where I needed to go, and I would get a lift or get to go on the bus for free if I, did it with the right person or whatever. Sometimes I would walk to my mum's work, which was maybe like 3 to 5 kilometers from my school, and just ask her for money and say I don't have money to get home. And she would be understandably insanely angry and embarrassed, because she'd be like, I gave you the money, like it's not a me problem, I gave you the money. And like as an earth sign, one thing she did well was she gave me money for things that I needed, not always things I wanted, but definitely she did that. And so she'd be like getting called to the gate because her little child said she didn't have money. And she'd be like, oh my God, people must think that I am not taking care of you and you're just being irresponsible. And me and my Aries descendant self would be like, sorry, not sorry. I'll say sorry in the moment just to get this conversation over and done with. And then I'm going to go fuck off and do it again, because that's what I was like as a child. I was a menace, an absolute menace. I felt so much like, I guess the early messaging was to me, even though, and I know that all the adults in my life now, if I told them how I perceive being a child, would rush around to deny the ways in which I interpreted things that happened around me. But it doesn't really matter, because that is how I absorbed it, and I acted accordingly. But the messaging for me was I felt unloved. I had friends that had two-parent household, or households that I looked up to. I know now as an adult that two-parent household doesn't equal happiness, and neither does a family that looks happy, doesn't even translate to them being happy anyway. Every family has its thing. Even the happy ones have their things, right? But as a child, I felt like a lone agent, a free radical, if you will, just kind of there existing. And so, yeah, I just kind of acted like a lawless person. There was a lot of escaping. I would run away from home. I would not want to leave my friends' houses, especially if I just projected and or perceived their family to be more warm, welcoming than mine, then you would be hard pressed to, especially if that family wasn't rushing to have me leave. I would leave at the absolute latest. And I think I still exhibit some of that as well. Like if I'm hanging out with like the right people and the vibes are really good, I can have a real hard time wanting to finish that time and being like, okay, now it's done, because I'm so happy to be received, seen, loved, accepted, that I want to bask in that for as long as possible, because there's different aspects of my life where I feel ostracized and projected upon, bullied, and all of the things. Even though it's much less so these days, I think these days I still see that, but more in like adult coded language and behavior, where people think that you can't read it, but you can, because you're really intuitive and you've had to be hyper vigilant ever since you were a child because of your upbringing. And so now I notice all the little things, and being psychic too, I'll know if you are, at first maybe you might fool me for like a second. I'll be like, okay, this person really likes me. But if I start noticing micro expressions, I'll eventually realize, oh my God, you're nice to me, but not about me. I can very much see that pretty soon after I start a relationship with someone, like a friendship or a romantic relationship. I can eventually notice that, like, oh my God, even though you don't think I know, I can tell that you have the makings of someone who probably talks about me as soon as I leave, and you'll talk about all the things that you hated. But in the moment, you were telling me everything that you thought I wanted to hear so that you could gain my approval, because really, you're probably jealous of me and you're probably wanting acceptance from me weirdly, but then wanting to lord over me by critiquing me so that you can feel higher than me, because once you met me, you decided in your own mind that I was higher than you. So you've categorized yourself. You've put yourself above me. Sorry, you've put yourself beneath me by thinking I'm above you, or thinking that I think I'm above you, which I don't. I don't think I'm above anyone. And so you project that onto me, and then slowly I'll start to see the hateration in the way that you respond to things, or the way that you want me to downplay my accomplishments, and you get upset, or you'll make little comments that when I was younger I would have been really confused by why you would make a comment that kind of seemed laced with this other energy. But now as an adult, I'm like, oh, I know that I recognize now that when people make these comments, they're like basically like negging you. So yeah, as a child, I would try to run away a lot, and I think it's because I was unsatisfied with growing up. I was unsatisfied with the systems that were, and I was unsatisfied with my parentage and feeling wholeheartedly seen, loved, and accepted. And yeah, my father not being in my life, as much as like if you'd asked me as a teenager and even in my early 20s, I would have been like, I'm better than that. I don't, yeah, it doesn't bother me. It really did affect me. And I mean, it doesn't bother me in the sense that I think I kind of accepted really young that he just wasn't someone who was going to love me. I didn't really have any false expectations that he would love me after interacting with him only a few times. And so, if you heard the first episode, I always love calling them episodes. I don't know what it is. I think it's also I write, so I think I called it chapter one because I thought it'd be funny. But I realized, after the first few interactions, that this was just a person that really wanted to act like a father and not be a father. And it was like, okay, well, you acting like a father and me noticing that you're only acting it out isn't pleasing and isn't soothing that wound inside. I still feel fatherless and loveless from that paternal expression of energy. And so it did irk me, and it definitely affected later on my people pleasing tendencies and my seeking to find the love that I craved in men, because I was like, okay, well, it doesn't matter that he didn't want me in his life, because, it's his prerogative. But if I can find a man in this life that will love and appreciate me for the way that I am, then it's fine. You know, he was the one that didn't see it, but maybe there will be people that do see it. And in general, with my 11th house placements, as I've spoken about so many times, I am someone who can be seen as eccentric. And so when I would date men, there was always people that didn't like me having those men in my life. It was always, particularly the mothers. I found a lot of people, like my friends' mothers and stuff, really, really like me. But whenever I date men, the mothers, to be fair, I don't know if there is a correlation. I'll look it up and maybe address it in the next episode. I didn't think of it until this very moment. I wonder if there is a correlation with mama's boys and father wounds, because I've attracted a lot of mama's boys. And so those kinds of men, their mothers would feel very threatened, especially by my power and my being very assertive. And I guess they wanted to be the only ones with that level of influence over their sons' lives. And so I come in, and then it kind of becomes this tense Mexican standoff where the mother then ends up eventually, if not immediately, beginning to undermine and say things that contribute to the degradation of the relationship by affecting how my partner may see or perceive me. And that's not to put it all on their mothers, because these were also grown men in their own right. But I do understand how familial influence is very important to a lot of people. Now, because of the way that I have felt growing up, this emotional disconnect from my family, I can be very cold about matters of family sometimes. I've noticed in a way that can be jarring to people. I think I do believe in the importance of family. You'll know that by the fact that I consistently reference my ancestors and I consistently reference where I come from. But I think what I hold reverence to is the greater understanding of the family and what it means for us all to be conjoined. When I'm looking at my family, I'm looking at it as like, okay, why were we put into each other's lives? So yes, I felt all of this, you know, all of these lacking things, but also I can recognize what my family have taught me and why they were put in my life in that sense. I was such a sensitive child that without my family causing me this hard shell that I've built, causing me to harden up, you know, it probably would have led to me being more taken advantage of in more ways than I have been, because they've caused such a strength of mind and spirit. I've had to fight for myself first in the family before I've had to fight to prove myself externally. And so I can recognize that they've taught me that. And if it wasn't for them, I probably would have been in more cooked situations than I have been. I can also recognize that in the same way that I felt this devoid black hole of emotion, my family have benefited from me because I am emotional. My family have benefited from me because of my empathy. They have benefited from me because I am as non-judgmental, I think, as a human can get. I'm sure I'm very judgmental in a lot of ways, but I think the Libran in me really aims to be more objective. And so family members know that they can come to me and talk about things that they can't with other people, because I'll have greater understanding for the things that other people will want to shame them for. And so I think I've added richness to our family through my emotional world, through my standing firmly in my differences. And so I have a greater reverence for the greater family, for the fact that I am a representation of all the women that came before me. I really think about that actively, and I go out of my way to try and break generational curse. I go out of my way to feel gratitude that I have the opportunities that they didn't. I have the opportunities to have my own bank account. I have my, you know, all of that sort of stuff. But there's a lot of one-on-one familial things that I don't agree with. One of them being, for example, what I wrote here, people feeling entitled to you for only sharing DNA with them. I detest that. I detest that wholeheartedly. And so when I've spoken to people and how they communicate with their family members, I can be very quick to be like, I just wouldn't take that. I wouldn't hang out with them. I wouldn't let them have access to me. I'd stop talking to them. I'd cut them off. That can be very jarring to people. But that's because that was one thing that really grated me very early on about my father's entrance into my life at that later age that I discussed around 9, is he just came in feeling entitled to hearing about how my life is going, to extracting all of this information from me and not giving anything back. He never gave me any advice of substance. All he did and said is like very generic adult things. Make sure to keep your grades up, be a good girl. Like, what's that going to do for me, sir? Please, please. Like, what am I supposed to do with that? Be a good girl in this day and age? Good girls get taken advantage of. Like, you want me to be a good girl so that you can put me in the patriarchal system so that I can find a man and be a good girl to him while he goes and sleeps around? No, please. Can you see the masculine energy in me? Can you see that air signness? You know, like, people are always like, oh my god, Libra women, you know, they're so girly and they're so and so the Libra women are masculine. Okay, we are just as masculine as we are feminine. And so the idea of this man coming into my life, thinking that just because he contributed his seed to the process of conception, I am supposed to hold reverence for him. I'm supposed to look up to him when he's done absolutely fuck all. And the things that he did, I thought were subpar and I thought were lacking. And I thought, you know, he wasn't a man of his word. And so, yeah, I have definitely learned when I was younger that family can have these expectations of you, and they get away with a lot because, especially when you're a woman, being socialized to be a people pleaser. I'm a people pleaser not just because of my father wound, my mother wound, being a woman. It's because of women's socialization. It's because we are socialized to ignore our needs. As a first eldest African daughter, my role was all about doing things for other people, pleasing other people. If people commented on my body, commented on my sense of style, that was supposed to mean something. I was supposed to adjust my behavior based on that critique. I was supposed to take that shit seriously, okay? I was so well trained in this, like, whole being the eldest daughter, being the eldest African daughter, you know. I can remember one time I was home alone. I was probably 10 or something. Home alone. This uncle comes, like, some, I don't know, uncle somewhere in the family. He wasn't expected to be there. So, of course, I received them. I was like, oh, people aren't going to be home until this time. Do you want something to eat? Do you want something to drink? He's like, yes, of course. I led him to the couch. I got out, I got him a glass of water. I remember the power was off one that day, and I was really happy to show him how grown I was. And so I stoked a fire, got it together. The fire was like right outside the kitchen. That's normally where we cooked if we had to cook outside instead of inside. Stoked the fire. I remember what I cooked too. I made rice, and in the rice, once it started boiling and once it really started like getting going, I added frozen peas in there. So I did like a whole rice and peas concoction. I don't remember what the exact relish was, but it would have been some sort of relish because that's generally what we have most things with in Zimbabwe. And we call relish soup, by the way. So I made, you know, whatever soup it was, and then I was really excited, so I made sure that the presentation was impeccable. And then, in typical African fashion, or at least Southern African fashion, well, let me just say Zimbabwean because, you know, I know a lot of Africans hate when we lump each other together because we do have very different cultures. And so, in typical Zimbabwean fashion, I got a jug and a dish, filled them, put a dish cloth on my arm, so I'm holding the dish with the jug, and I go and I kneel in front of him because that is normal. This what I'm saying to you isn't I wasn't doing anything abnormal. This is something that some women in Zimbabwe are doing currently as they're receiving guests in their house. Kneel on the ground before him, help him wash his hands into the larger bowl, hand him the dishcloth. He wipes his hands, he gives it back to me. and then I put it back in the bowl. I get up off my knees and I go back into the kitchen and I just let him eat. And that was such a sense of pride for me because I had shown my homemaking skills being so young. You know, I had shown that I had been well trained. I'd shown that I was really good at listening to instructions. I was really good at pleasing men and women. Like, that's the energy that I was raised with. So, how the hell was I supposed to go into adulthood and into romantic relationships not expecting some sort of level of servitude and some sort of level of people pleasing that may have at times been overriding my own wants and needs? And then also being a Libra, there's this sense of I don't want to have conflict. I'm very conflict avoidant. And so, not addressing things that upset me and only waiting until things built up so much that I really couldn't stop but express the burst of energy that came out of me and be like, oh my God, I've been holding all this in. And then having someone be shocked, like, wait a dang minute, like, I didn't even realize that you had a problem. And so, yes, people pleasing is an expression of the father wound that is so hard to get out of. It's so hard to get out of in general. And then being a woman, you've got that socialization on top of that. And so that's like a really heavy, deep well from which you must pull yourself. And you do that by firstly learning to say no and say, I don't like that. We're always talking about, oh my God, like you should just say no to things. But genuinely being able to express when you don't like something, you don't like a decision as soon as it's made. You don't like where something is going in a social gathering. You can just say like, I don't know, like now that we're really like it's getting people are getting drunk, they're getting wasted. Like I didn't really come for this. Like I came for like the core thing that we've already done now. We've done the exchange of presents, we've eaten, we've done all the things, but at this point, like that's me done. You know, and I think as women we aren't always great at asserting ourselves in those ways. And so it really starts with practicing saying no and then realizing that you haven't died because you might have even disappointed the other person. And I think it's really good to practice first in your friendships because your friendships should be honestly one of the safest places. I mean, as someone who's ruled by the 11th house because my chart ruler is there and I have a few placements in the 11th house, friendships are to me equally important to family, and I hold as much reverence, if not more, because friends are chosen family and friends are choosing to show up for you and choosing to listen to you, especially in all the ways that other people don't. That strangers don't see you in the ways that your parents don't see the good qualities in you or misunderstand you. Your friends are supposed to really see you purely in the ways in where they accept your negative and positive traits. And so a safe place to practice saying no is your friendships. And when and if people arc up, and not arc up and then get over it and then get with the program eventually, but in the sense that it's just they are not going to stand for this new you. They're not going to stand for this autonomous you. That's a sign. That's a friendship that you have to let go. Friendships should be that enriching, that you should be able to be your full self. And if you can't, then that shouldn't be a friendship that you should have. Because there's certain things we can't help. We can't help our families that we're born into, even though spiritually I'm of the belief that I probably did choose them. But, there's certain things that like you aren't consciously aware that you've kind of landed here because there was a choice in there for you. And I totally respect if you don't believe that, because I know because of all the trauma that we go through with our families, it's totally understandable if the belief that you chose to be in that is really triggering for you. So I want to acknowledge that, and don't feel pressured to feel the way that I do about things. Like, your worldview is totally your own, and I accept that. And so, yeah, friendships are a good place to start. And then once you do and you get that down pat, I think next is your romantic relationships, because I find, especially with women and especially as younger women, we can have a reverence. God, I'm really using that word today. We can really look up to men, pedestalize them, look at them, excuse me, as something beautiful outside of ourselves, this thing that we want to attain, that we want to have by our side, sometimes that we want to own, sometimes that we want to control, sometimes that we want to solve and or fix all our problems. And I think that is what translates. I can see it in my younger self. I've been out of this for a while now, thank goodness, but I definitely see it in other women, even that are older than me at this age. It can cause women to not speak to men like they're human beings and really hold way too much space for them. It's in the examples of, like, when women say things like yeah, I do clean up after him, but what can I do? He's a man. They just don't get these things. What do you mean? He's a man and a human being? If we all have to learn, like, if we all have to eat, then learning to cook is a normal aspect of being a human being, and it's not sex dependent. And but so many women will really take on these sort of patriarchal qualities and ideas, wherein they start believing and infantilizing men and their inability to really show up. Excuse me. To really show up as adults and do the things that adults are supposed to do. And then there's this inability to explain and assert yourself in the way of, like, okay, I'm an autonomous human being, but now I'm caring for you and being an autonomous human being, and that's putting so much weight on me. And then now I'm wondering why I'm sick, or I'm gaining a lot of weight, or I'm losing a lot of weight when I'm dating you. And so, yeah, I think as women and as people with father wounds, men with father wounds, learning to not want to please everyone around you. I think with men with father wounds as well, sometimes it comes across as these men wanting mothers when they're dating, and there's nothing that puts me off more as an eldest child than a man wanting to treat me like their mother. I already felt like I had to mother a lot of people around me growing up, and I still feel like when all else fails, I mother people. I'm other people in the workplace. I'm other people in like different aspects of my life, because it's just a skill I've honed. And it really, a lot of people that I meet when they're adults and I have issues with them, I can just see that they're a hurt little child inside. And so sometimes I have to like use my maternal skills with them. But yeah, men with father wounds that I've dated, I've noticed they want you to be their mother and to take care of them and create this safe space and this like holistic safe space, where they never have to feel like they are not loved because that's what their father did to them. I actually had a particular ex, he'll know who he is, who would cry to me when I would try to hold him to account for things that he did, and cry that it was reminding him of his father, and like, his father didn't love him, and like his father left him. And like at first I was really confused as to why that was happening, because I just didn't want to believe that he would be trying to manipulate me like that. But eventually, once I did accept it, and once one of his family members actually confirmed, like, oh yeah, he does that, he's just known for wanting to manipulate people in that way, it really like irked me. And so I would sit there while he was crying and I'd just like stare blank faced, no tear in eye, and just be like, okay, and my father left me, so what do you want me to do with that information? And that would really irk him, because he just wanted the empathy and wanted the conversation to be redirected and to be over from the responsibilities that I was trying to put upon him as a grown man. And he didn't want to be a grown man. He wanted to be a boy his whole life, and always lean on that wound, that father wound, as the reason why he couldn't achieve his dreams and the reason why things didn't pan out for him, so that he could be in a victim mindset. And I think it really irked him that I wasn't sitting pretty in a victim mindset. And I think as a woman, we have way less ability to do that, and way less breath, and way less patience from those around us when we are in a victim mindset. And so we don't really get to do that for long, or really like lean into it. Some women do, and I cannot co-sign that shit. And so, yeah, I've seen that in men with father wounds, or even noticing that they're the male approval for them is of utmost importance. So dating men who, in the end, their friends' opinions actually really mattered more than me, their partner, because for them, there's nothing greater than the masculine, and they were missing some of that praise from their own father, even if he was present. I've dated people that came from two-parent households, and it didn't, and that's what made me eventually realize that just because someone's from a two-parent household doesn't make their upbringing healthier than yours or anything like that. And so, yeah, the way in which they would seek male approval was to their detriment as well, because they, especially when they're younger too, aren't really as intuitive. Like, men aren't really that intuitive when they're younger, and if they are, sometimes they're using it for manipulation. This is not to say all men. And so, yeah, I would just notice, like, these men weren't aware when the men around them were jealous and wanting to rob them of their blessings, and so would give them terrible advice that they themselves wouldn't take. And you would even notice that they themselves, in similar situations, wouldn't take that advice. And I'd be sitting there, like, dating this person and being like, can't you see? Can't you see what's happening in front of you? These people are trying to stop you from being with me because they want you to themselves, or they don't think you deserve someone as good as me because they didn't have someone as good as that, like as me, in their lives. And so they want to rob you of the blessings. And I found so many men fall for it hook, line, and sinker. The way men fall for their the lies that come from their friends, and like, I can see, I'm blind, blind. That is so a lot of men with their friendships or with the men in their lives that they look up to. There's not a thing that you could say, there's not a piece of evidence that they can give you and you can be like, you can't see that, like, they just, yeah, they can get a bit blinkered. So I thought I would just add that in at the end to talk about the men in my life that I have observed that had father wounds and how I think that it came through. But yeah, this is what I will call episode chapter 2, whatever you like, discussing father wounds. I hope that you found that useful. I still wanted to make it free form. When I write, I'm a lot more rigid about how information comes across. But like I said, I think talking makes it feel a little bit more personable and like I'm having a conversation with you and not like I'm talking at you and giving you information in that regard. So whatever you can do, learn more about people pleasing and where it comes from and its triggers. If you're someone who's into astrology, look at your sun, because your sun sign tells you your relationship with your father. I'm sun in the 12th. That's an emotionally or physically absent father. It can have other expressions as well. Look at your sun sign and just compare, like, the sun and the house, and compare that to the relationship that you have with your father. Look at your Chiron, look at your Lilith, and look at these placements and really think about how your father wound correlates to these things. Then journal about them. Follow that train and that thought process to try and get it to like its tiniest point. um, Not just saying, oh, okay, I realized because my father wasn't in my life, I had attention seeking behaviors, and then that's it. It's like, okay, I realized that because my father wasn't in my life, I had attention seeking behaviors and it led me to do this, but also I can recognize that it wasn't just him, it's because I was also lacking in this way. And then, like, really mind map it. Like, when I am doing shadow work and I'm trying to get to the root of an issue, I don't want to just, I want to follow a train of thought and then branch off and then kind of get like an overall tree of information. And then that can kind of really help me decide what to do with that information. I hope you've enjoyed this episode, chapter of this Father Wound series. I hope you get a lot out of it. I am excited to go into more of my notes so that we can really get to the bottom of this and we can heal together. Let me know your thoughts. Please share your experiences, share your healing journey, and let's all connect as a community. I appreciate you in advance. Thank you for all of your support, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.